Ladies, gentlemen, others, welcome to the first ever episode of the Split Screen Podcast, the official podcast of blankpagebeatdown.com. I am Shah Shahid, your typical Desi boy next door with the non-threatening good looks and the disarming charm. And it's my pleasure to also be your host for this show. So now you're all probably thinking, who the hell is this arrogant son of a gun? Well, first of all, don't swear at me. You don't know me. Secondly, you're right. Who the hell am I? Well, I'm basically your average South Asian-born, Canadian-bred Desi Munda with an unnatural and just obsessive love for movies. This passion basically explodes onto the page in the form of my own website, which is blankpagebeatdown.com, which is where I just go off on rants about movies, television shows, comics, and anything geek-related that just excites me. My website actually features everything from movie news, reviews, updates on the latest releases every single month, and detailed trailer breakdowns, discussions, and sometimes, if I'm in the mood, even some wild theories about upcoming movies and TV shows, both from the Hollywood and Bollywood industries. Basically, anything that gets me talking. Well, typing, because, it's a website. So please check out the site, it's blankpagebeatdown.com, and just show me some love. Online love. Like, comments and stuff. Nothing inappropriate. Unless you're hot, then I'll allow it. Then that's fine. It's a totally different thing. Now, on to the show. So, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, then this is the show to start with. This is episode 00. And what the Split Screen Podcast is about is basically we're going to compare and analyze movies that are adaptations or remakes of other works, and we're going to compare them with the source material that they were inspired by. The whole point is to figure out how good or bad the adaptations were, and most excitingly for me, is to go off on long-winded, swear word-filled rants when they end up being bad, which is a lot of the times. Now, the realm of these films, remakes, will basically be adaptations of novels, comic books, other movies or TV shows, or basically anything else that they were directly inspired by. Split Screen is also going to do something really cool and fun for those of you that don't know about this, but we're going to introduce the world to a mother lode of Bollywood movies that were, quote unquote, inspired by classic and cult films of Hollywood and other industries, and sometimes with hilarious results. So without any more of my babbling, let's kick off the first ever show of the Split Screen Podcast, the official podcast of blankpagebeatdown.com. Hi everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Split Screen Podcast, the official podcast of blankpagebeatdown.com. My name is Shah Shahid, and on top of being clinically diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, commonly known as ADHD, I will also be your host for this show. Today, with me on the show, I've got Kathy Gibson from accessbollywood.com. Kathy, say hi.
Hi, Shah.
How's it going?
Things are going very well. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Nervous, excited. It's the first show. Trying not to slur or, stammer or use the word like 50 times. So pretty good.
Good.
So today, again, like I mentioned, we're just going to go through, it's going to be a very simple show. We're going to go through two remakes. Pretty famous remakes. If you've heard of a movie called Memento, I'm not sure. Young director, he got his start. And there was a remake about it, so we're going to discuss that, and as well as a current movie. But before we jump into it, I do want to quickly discuss the remakes itself. Like, we live in a time now where there's really no original movies anymore. Everything's based on something. Everything's a remake. It's a sequel. It's a franchise. It's cinematic universe in some cases. So in terms of remakes, Kathy, how do you feel about remakes in general?
I think it's sort of inevitable. Whenever anything is successful, everybody just wants to copy it and reproduce that success. And the easiest way is to just take the existing property and put some new, dress it up in a new way. And especially when you're able to cross from country to country and do that and localize things, it's kind of unfortunate that it limits the new ideas, but from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I guess cross market, you kind of expand your audience and things like that. Or you have idiots like us who will watch both.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's double the money right there. So, I mean, for our listeners that might not be aware, first of all, I'm hugely into Bollywood, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you actually go on my website, blankpagebeatdown.com, I tend to lean more towards Bollywood stuff. It's my first love. I grew up with those kind of movies. I love movies in general, but Bollywood, like I said, I grew up on it. I can't really get it out of my system. Obviously, my tastes have changed as I've gotten older, as I've been exposed to more Hollywood or international films. I kind of see some of the Bollywood, I'm going to say, faults. I might not be being fair right there, but still, some of it's more indulgences, let's say, running around trees, the grandiose characters and big budgets that are spent on an outfit. Things like that, basically. But essentially, I'm a Bollywood lover, and I know Kathy, you're a Bollywood lover. You actually, I stumbled upon. I don't even know how I saw your website, but I came upon it somehow, and I'm like, oh, this white girl is talking about Bollywood here, and I read the stuff, and I'm like, God damn, this is interesting. And again, you kind of had a totally different perspective on Bollywood movies that I've never really thought of, or And again, and for everyone else too, like I review movies, so I tend to not read reviews of the movies that I'm gonna write about, just so I don't get biased. But Kathy's reviews, I read religiously, just because it's and I don't always agree, but it's it makes me look at the movie from a totally different viewpoint, and almost sometimes a more objective viewpoint than I walk into it. Like there's certain actors' movies I'll walk in and I'll be like, yay, and I'll love it. And then, like, 3 weeks later, I'm like, that was pretty shit right there. And actually, that happened to me. That, I'll admit it. We're going to talk about this later on, but I actually do that for Gajni a little bit. I rewatched that, but we'll get into that in a second. Kathy, do you want to tell people a little bit about, your background, how you kind of got into this, your introduction, your origin story, if you will?
Ooh, good. I feel like Wolverine or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I run accessbollywood.com. I've been on the web for probably, I think, 8 years now, or 7 or 8 years at this point. I started at writing short reviews for a newspaper just outside of Chicago, out in the suburbs. And after about a year, they got rid of their coverage. And so I went online, and that's when I started accessbollywood.com. And so obviously my background is in Hollywood movies and, other international stuff. But it was around 2006, I think, that I started watching Bollywood movies, and it has been the majority of what I watch at this point is Bollywood, for sure. I do probably 50 to 60 reviews every year, just of stuff that's very current. I'm lucky enough to have a theater just 5 minutes away from me that shows every new Bollywood movie. So that's what I focus on at my website. And so I think I've got a pretty good grasp on everything for about the last 7 or 8 years.
No, I completely agree with you. And so you don't watch how many Hollywood movies do you get a chance to watch in a year?
It kind of, I don't know, it varies. I'm trying to be more disciplined about it instead of just cramming things in. I'm a member of the Online Film Critics Society, and so I do a lot of watching from basically October through November before we vote on our end of the year awards. I'm trying to be a little bit more disciplined, so it probably equals out to about, I don't know, probably another, I don't even really want to estimate. I'm not sure. It's not as many not as many Hollywood movies as Bollywood movies, but
which is exactly how the industries are set up too, right? Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and especially when here in the U.S. now we're getting, unlike when I started even 7 years ago, you didn't have a new movie in the theater every single week, and you do that now. I mean, I think last year there were 53 53 Hindi movies, just Hindi movies, not any of the other Indian language movies, but Hindi movies released in the US and Canada, just in theaters. And that's not counting other things that wind up online that don't get theatrical release. Um, so there's so much to choose from that it's really easy to, you're always going to be busy if you're watching Bollywood movies.
Yeah, no, it definitely, and again, it's a good time. Like, I mean, again, like you said, it's movies have become so much more accessible.
Hmm.
And again, a lot of these movies now are being made for, for the North American or international markets as well. Like, which is a whole other topic. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, they're taking into consideration. Before it was just kind of like the only thing that Bollywood movies kind of pandered to or catered to, to be nicer. Is essentially, like the non-Indian residents, and they had all this patriotic bullshit. DDLJ
Hmm.
comes to mind, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. All the Yash Raj films from back in the day. Again, they didn't pander to, a non-Indian audience, but they kind of did with all these, homesick,
Hmm.
people that lived abroad. Whereas now you've got movies about characters that are living in, America or Boston or Chicago, for example. I think Doom 3
Hmm.
was set in Chicago. But and yeah, so clearly, yeah, of course, the market's going to grow, and again, Bollywood, I think, kind of beats out Hollywood productions by God knows how many movies in a year, probably double if you take into account not just the Hindi language films, but all the other films. Also, I know Kathy. Again, just to let everyone know, Kathy, you also do a lot of. I mean, I haven't read the reviews or I haven't seen any reviews, but you're also very aware of like the business side of things too, which I always admire. The numbers and you're always aware of
Hmm.
other Indian language films that are coming out. Is that something that you're interested in, or is that just part of like your background?
I'm fascinated by the box office numbers. I am really interested to see what does well, why does it do well. Um, and it's Hindi movies still have a much greater share of the box office in North America than the other um, like South Indian movies do. Apart from rare, major releases. If it has Rajinikanth in it, obviously it's going to make a ton of money. Um, but
Yes.
it's been fun watching how much more money and which movies are getting a bigger share of the earnings this year in 2015. The two biggest movies have been Piku and Tanu Weds Manu Returns to this point, and it's they've blown everything else out of the water. And of course,
Surprisingly.
yeah, and what differentiates them, of course, is that they have women in the leading roles. Deepika Padukone in Piku, obviously Amitabh
Hmm.
Bachchan as well, but then Kangana Ranaut, everybody says that Kangana is the whole reason to go see Tana Mana Returns, and to see how that's shifted, where suddenly now we've got women who can carry these movies, and you're not just relying on a man whose last name is Khan to be the driver of box office receipts.
I feel like I should defend Madhavan here, but I really can't. Plus, she's in that movie twice. Kangana's in Tanu Weds
Hmm.
Manu Returns twice.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of like, okay, so she's good. She's leading it, but she's in it twice. So,
No,
which
no,
is
no, no slight on Madhavan, but he doesn't have as much to do as she does.
leave Madhavan alone. I love that guy. He has like this likable charm, and I'm just like, ah.
He does, and
But
he's spent some time in Chicago, which makes me really happy that he can discuss the area a little bit. So that's good.
nice. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so in terms of again going back to remakes and just kind of, do you feel like so you did mention it's kind of it makes business sense, right?
Hmm.
Do you also feel like again because like the knee jerk reaction whenever you hear about a remake is oh they're running out of ideas, right? Do you feel that's true?
Um, I don't. I think it's if we're just talking about the Indian film industry, I think it's very hard in both Bollywood and Hollywood to make it. I mean, it's obviously once you get a film made, it's that much easier for you to get another film made, and especially where in Bollywood there's you have a greater tendency toward having the directors also write their films, then you've really limited the number of people who are participating in the industry.
Hmm.
And so I think that I it's really tough, and I think there's not quite the same focus on writing as an independent as such a separate important part of a film in India that I think if you had more writers, it might change, but that I don't know that that's going to be happening anytime soon.
No, yeah, and I get what you mean too. Because I mean, unless like in Bollywood again, specifically talking, unless the writer also directs the film, like so many times that we don't know who it is. We don't,
Mm-hmm.
they're not, they're not popularized. They're not, at the launch. They're not at any of the press events or anything, unless the director happens to be, the person who also wrote the movie, or it happens to be a established director who happens to be writing a movie, which is the case for one of our movies that we're going to discuss today,
Mm-hmm.
which infuriates me, but we'll get into that. And so, in terms of, I mean, personally, I don't think it's a lack of original. I know there's a lot of times where they do want to kind of exploit the success of the original source material, be it the book. For example, a notable situation in Bollywood would be Chetan Bhagat. I'm not sure if you know about that author. He has, I mean, he's kind of become like a popular novelist who's had a bunch of his novels be made into feature films. I'm not going to read any of his books. I barely like majority of the movies. Actually, no, that's not really fair. I do like a lot of the movies that have been based on his books. But in that situation, it's kind of like you are using the popularity of the books to essentially rely on the audience for the movie that you're making.
Well, and look
So,
at how rare that is there too. That compared to here, where if you've got a successful young adult franchise,
oh God, yeah,
you're going to get a movie deal out of it.
everything.
And so
Damn you, Harry Potter.
it's, yeah, so it's funny that Bhagat is a rare case, and you see many more remakes made of in Bollywood of in Hindi films of South Indian movies that have been successful, and then vice versa. It flows back and forth, but it's that much more uh, not yeah, I guess insular, that where you're all drawing from the same source material, movies being remade of movies, and not even bringing in comics and books.
Right.
Um, so it's this very closed circuit within India, in a lot of ways.
And also, I mean, in terms of, it's only now. I mean, I don't even want to say now. I'm gonna say it's only in the last 2 years, because again, Bollywood hasn't had any like official remakes. I mean, in Hollywood, when they remake a movie like a yesteryear classic, it's usually there's legal processes happening. They're registering things and they're getting permissions, and it's the studio who has the rights to the film are involved in some way. But Bollywood, up until last year, 2014, every Bollywood quote unquote remake of a Hollywood movie has been, let's call it what it is, a ripoff. Like, it's been literally like, I like that, let's do that here, but let's call them Vijay and Arti, and it's like, okay, sure, let's do it. And it'll be in India, and we're gonna cram in some songs in between, and it's like, okay, great, and then I give you Mission Impossible, and it's what? So, and I mean, it's only now that it's become, original. But beyond that business aspect, like, what do you think? In what situations do you think a remake would be justified? Not taking into effect, the business reasons or the expansion of the market or the audience. Like, why would, from a creative perspective, like, why would a movie that is being remade be justified in doing so?
Oh, I think there's probably a lot of movies where it just is such a good, simple story that can translate really well. I finally just watched Infernal Affairs the other night, which is
Hmm.
what went on to became The Departed in the U.S. And as soon as I finished, I thought, man, every director who has watched that movie probably thinks, I wish I had directed that. And so if you can remake that and just
And
change
then they
this
go,
up.
you know what? I think I will.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's as long as I have no problem with it as long as you acknowledge the source, acknowledge the fact that somebody else wrote this and came up with the idea. Um, it's speaking, one of the movies we're going to be talking about, Gajni, has starts with a director's note that is one of the single funniest things I have ever read, and so I'm eager to delve into that.
Well, I mean, in terms of, I mean, you're speaking of, was that the clanging in the background you were telling me about earlier?
No, that's that's a car alarm.
Oh, okay. All right, totally different.
Yeah,
So, sorry, no, we were discussing earlier about how you're telling me it's raining, so you live in a time period where, you get warnings with town criers ringing bells from a bell tower about a flood. Um,
Yes. Yes, exactly.
It's exactly that is an accurate paraphrasing of our conversation from previously, not laced with lies at all. So sorry, getting back to it. So you mentioned Infernal Affairs, which again I do hope to talk about that movie and The Departed at one point in the show as well. But for example, Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. How many films? I mean, again, like you across genres, romantic comedies, action movies, dramatic films have been based on a variety of Shakespeare's works. And again, like you said, like when you said someone saw Infernal Affairs, and I'm sure other directors said, I wish I could do that. Shakespeare, a lot of Shakespeare's work, literally hundreds of directors have said that, and they have followed through with it. Taming of the Shrew, they say was the inspiration for 10 Things I Hate About You and things like that. Which again, and it runs a whole gamut of dramatic movies that you can see, and not just Hollywood or anyone else, all over the world, including Bollywood movies that have been inspired by. I mean, I'm annoyed at the number of Romeo and Juliet remakes there have been, or inspirations, or whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. So it is understandable. Like for me personally, I feel like I think a remake should happen. Again, not counting any of the monetary and business aspects of it. I think a remake happens when you have enough ideas, or when you feel like, you know what, here's a story that I can either update or modernize or tweak enough to tell a different story. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be a beat by beat kind of, scene by scene, and you do something very lazy where I'm going to change the city, and I'm going to change the whole royalty backdrop to a criminal hierarchy backdrop, and it's like, okay, but that's easy, like what are you doing that's new? For example, again, going off on tangents, Vishal Bharadwaj, speaking of Shakespeare, he has, I believe, it's a trilogy now, right? Essentially, He's got 3 movies, which personally I feel like he made his mark with those 3 movies, despite anything else that he did in between. Vishal Bharadwaj is an Indian director who made Maqbool was his first, which was based on Macbeth, and then he did Omkara, which was based on Othello, and recently, just last year again, he did Hyder, which was based on Hamlet. Mm-hmm. And again, to this day, I haven't seen Hyder yet, which I will. And he's knocked it out of the park. He's adapted the story, not just the story, not just the setting, but the characters, the motivations, the politics between them. He's adapted everything from Shakespeare in such a way that it suits the climate. It's not a lazy adaptation. I remember, spoilers for people who haven't seen Maqbool, in Macbeth, because I studied Macbeth in school, so it really stands out for me, more so than Othello. In Macbeth, I think the opening of the play is the 3 witches or something. Mm-hmm. Yep. Foreseeing or foreshadowing something about the story. And he brilliantly opens Maqbool with 3 corrupt police officers on a stakeout or something, just getting drunk and playing cards in the back of a van. And I think it was Nasruddin Shah. I'm not sure if Ompuri was in it. It's been a couple of years, but it's the 3 of them, and they're setting the stage, just like the play, just like the 3 witches. These 3 characters are setting the stage for the movie, outlining the major players, who's the boss, who's the crime lord, who's the, and it's the exact same scene, but it's tweaked so much that you're like, holy shit. Like, this captures the essence of the witch scene from Shakespeare and makes it so accessible to someone who's never heard of Shakespeare.
And that's what I think what is the most important thing is that Bharadwaj is my favorite director. And he understands what the movie is about at its essence. I guess, what's the technical term? Grokking something. He groks what the movie is about. And that's where I've seen other remakes fall very, very, very short of that. And Gajni, for example.
We'll get into that in just a second. So, lastly, I just want to quickly ask you, what are your favorite movies that were remade from, like, other source material? Like, be it books or, adaptations, essentially.
Probably all of the... I haven't seen Maqbool, but Haydar I love. And then Omkara I love. His Bharadwaj's reinterpretations of Shakespeare are my favorite. They're really, really hard to beat.
I'd love for him to do something like Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, I'd love to see him do a comedy. Yeah. Enough with the tragedy.
Because, he's done... I love... the most recent thing he did was Matru Ki Bijli Ka Mandola, which I thought was ridiculously good. And, from him. Anyone else, I think it would have been a lot over the top than it actually was. Mm-hmm. But from him, I felt it was the perfect amount of ridiculously stupid and, the perfect amount of, symbolism. which sounds weird together, but he did it. But no, I agree. I'd like to see him do some comedies. Okay, so and I think we've ranted enough about all this. I do want to cover. So in terms of official remakes, we've harped on about how most Bollywood remakes are rip-offs. How do these guys not get sued? I don't even understand. But and I hope we have nothing to do with it in the future. So there is another official remake coming. I believe this year it's going to be released. Brothers, which is basically a Karan Johar produced film. Starring Akshay Kumar and Siddharth Malhotra from Student of the Year. They're going to be doing a new movie called Brothers, which is going to be based on the Hollywood film Warrior with Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy. Might have butchered that guy's last name. How do you? Yeah, how do you? Have you seen the? There's been posters out. There's been first looks. Have you seen any of those?
I haven't watched the first look yet for Brothers, but considering that I really liked the original movie, and the second I heard, okay, it's going to be remade with Siddharth, and Akshay as brothers, even though he's probably old enough to be Siddharth's dad.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that their mom in that is played by Shefali Shah, who is, I think, 42 currently, and Akshay is, I believe, 49. So his mother in the movie is younger than he is, and so
weird enough, there was a precedent for that though, because Shefali actually did play Akshay's mom in another movie, Waqt, with Amitabh Bachchan, and honest to God, I thought she was that age, and it wasn't until I think years later when I'm like, wait, she's how old? I mean, this girl played wife to Amitabh Bachchan, and she's literally like some of I guess his Aishwarya's age, I guess his daughter-in-law.
It's she's I think I think at the time it's she just played the Priyanka Chopra and Ranveer Singh's mother in Dil Dharakne Do. I can't say
Dil Dharakne Do. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's okay. That's what I'm here for.
And so she just played their mother, and so this is unfortunately when you get past the age of 35, all you can be is mother and married to guys who are much much older than you. So,
right. But that only applies to the women though.
Right, only women.
Only applies to the women.
You can play, if you're a man, you can play a college student well into your 50s.
And they do. We've had that. And the thing is, though, they don't look nearly as young as, let's say, James Van Der Beek when he was shooting for Dawson's Creek.
Yeah. But Back to Brothers, as soon as it was announced, I cringed. So I think it's scheduled to come out on August 14th. So
yes, I think later on this year. The trailer should be coming soon. But I think the best part about Brothers to me, the best casting for me, is Jackie Shroff in the role that was played by Nick Nolte in the original Warrior. And I think that's brilliant because both those guys off screen have such a history of antics. And I felt like, you know what, if anyone was going to be crazy Nick Nolte on screen, it has to be crazy Jackie Shroff. There's no one else that can do that better.
Yeah, no, that casting is perfect.
I know what you mean about the age difference. It's weird because what made Warrior good was the fact that you have the two brothers from totally different lifestyles. But if you look at the first look of Brothers, it's hard to tell which. I mean, clearly Akshay should be playing the older brother, with Siddharth being the younger one. But it's hard to tell because they both have like this Tom Hardy quality in the images. Tom Hardy again was played the again, spoilers for people who haven't seen Warrior, the army deserter. And he's very rugged. He's very, kind of looks like he's been in a bar brawl all the time. But both the Indian guys and the Indian version of Brothers look just like that. Like, Akshay doesn't look clean cut or like the school teacher that Joel Edgerton played in Warrior. So you're just kind of like, I don't get where, like, again, and posters vary from the actual and finished product of the movie, but it's weird.
Well, and it also just worries me, and not even so much the aesthetics, but just the acting ability, frankly, is, there's other guys I would have cast. There's a lot of really good work in Warrior. Those guys are really talented actors. And I haven't seen enough from Siddharth yet to convince me that he's up to it. And I'm
that guy's a walking billboard for just like nothing, like a freaking underwear ad or something. I don't know why he's even in the movies.
And I'm kind of an Akshay apologist. I have to, but I just don't know. I don't know. I'm worried. I'm concerned.
Well, interesting enough, the director of Brothers, and I feel like this guy's gonna get kind of screwed with this typecasting. He directed the remake of Agnipath, the original
Okay.
Agnipath. And again, I mean, that'll be another show. I feel like we've said that a lot this time. But Agnipath is another really good remake from the original, which kind of updates all the plot points into your modern day while still keeping the essence and the motivation of the characters as the original. So I'm really interested to see how this director is going to adapt now a Hollywood movie with Brothers. That's kind of my only redeeming quality about Brothers.
Yeah.
Also the fact that again Akshay is a fighter, so I'm sure
Yeah.
I hope to God the action scenes aren't as cliched or just uninteresting as the other boxing movies we had so far. Like Apne was Sunny Deol and the Deol brothers boxing movie, which I'm watching. And I'm like, this is slower than baseball. Like, what's happening right now? But yeah, so I mean, hopefully it's good, and definitely we'll dedicate a show to Brothers and Warrior, split screen analysis on this podcast when those movies come out. But I think it's time we move on. I want to take this time, because we're doing disclaimers, I also want to take this time to kind of mention certain things. This is a show that will feature swearing. So, especially when we get upset. I don't know about Kathy, but when I get upset, which will happen as soon as we get to Night and Day and Bang Bang, I will start swearing left and right. So if, leave your sensibilities at the door. And the other thing I do want to mention, so I don't know if anyone's been noticing, but I've said Bollywood a lot, whereas Kathy's, I don't know if it's intentional, but she has referred to the Hindi film industry a bunch of times. Now, the word Bollywood in the Indian film industry is derived from the word Hollywood, which is why a lot of people within the industry find it to be sort of offensive. There's champions of this, like Amir Khan, who doesn't prefer the word Bollywood to describe the Indian film industry, especially because Bollywood doesn't really even refer to the Indian film industry. It refers to a small section of the Indian film industry, which is the Hindi language movies made in Mumbai, which is basically like Los Angeles, California for India. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy. Feel free to jump in.
No, that's exactly right.
But me specifically, I don't want to keep saying the Hindi language film industry because that's a mouthful, and I already talk so much. I need to shave seconds where I can. So when I say Bollywood, I am referring to movies from India, regardless of the language. Again, I happen to watch mostly Hindi language movies. But at the same time, I don't discount movies of other industries, South movies, Telugu movies, Tamil movies, which are all, again, from that subcontinent. And some of them are great. Some of them have gone on to the Oscars. So I just want to make that clear that when we are saying Bollywood, we don't want to mean any offense to people, who don't like that usage of the word, and that we are including all the film industries of that region, of any language, and because I'm doing this now, we probably will cover one of the other language films because I would be really interested. I'd love to do a comparison of Singham and its original remake, as painful as that's going to be for everybody involved to listen to. But I just wanted to let everyone know about that. All right, so you know what, actually, guys, we've spoken so much today about what the show is going to be about and not all our introductions. We've gotten to know Kathy a little bit better, and hopefully myself, even though I just babbled on for a while. But we're actually going to discuss the movies in our next shows, just because we don't want to bore you. Everyone has a short attention span. Like I said, I have ADHD. So, Kathy, thank you so much for joining me today. You will be back next week. Where can people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at accessbollywood.com, and I'm on Twitter at Kathy F. Gibson. Oh yeah, there's no .com on Twitter, just Kathy F. Gibson.
So that is it. Thank you so much for joining us on the kickoff show for the Split Screen podcast. I'm a little emotional right now, but I'm going to try to keep it together. We will be back every week with a brand new show, a new movie remake to discuss, and a new guest who has to suffer through all my ramblings. We've got a bunch of shows already recorded for you guys, so they're going to keep coming. So subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast app, or visit the site at www.blankpagebeatdown.com to listen directly on the interweb. Subscribe to the site with your email in the top corner for the latest movie news, reviews, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at splitscreen_pod. Follow me personally on Twitter at the Shah Shahid. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/blankpagebeatdown. And email me any comments, suggestions, your hate mail, or just say hi. My email address is shah@blankpagebeatdown.com. That's SHAH@blankpagebeatdown.com. We'll be back very shortly with a brand new episode for you guys. So until then, try not to miss us too much.